Hi, my name is Mike Crawford and my project is baseball scheduling, a traveling tournament problem. A traveling tournament problem consists of a tournament where each team plays every other team twice, one home and one away. The objective is to try to minimize the total distance traveled by all teams during this tournament. There are two additional constraints, and they are that two teams may not play each other in consecutive weeks, and that a team may at most play 3 consecutive home or away games. Here is a sample distance file. As you can see, it is symmetric. The particular teams that are represented here are Atlanta, New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, Florida, and Pittsburgh. For the problems that I considered the National League of Major League Baseball, and then I considered subsets of these problems, which consisted of 4, 6, 12, and 16 teams, as shown here. Here's a map kind of depicting exactly where these teams are located. The approach I used was a simulated dealing type approach. In order to try to prevent stagnation, I would reheat the system in order to kind of promote more random type moves. For each move, it was a neighborhood of 5 different operators. The operators were swap homes, swap rounds, swap teams, partial swap teams, and partial swap rounds. As you can see, the neighborhoods were quite large. Just 4 teams was a neighborhood of over 300, while when you got up to 16 teams, the neighborhood was over 22,000. Here's an example of swap homes. As you can see, it simply takes 2 teams and swaps when they play at home. Here is an example of swap teams. As you can see, basically what it does is it swaps the schedule of 2 teams, except of course when they play each other. Here is an example of swap rounds. As you can see, all it does is simply swap the rounds. Here is an example of partial swap rounds. For partial swap rounds, you take 1 team and 2 rounds, and you swap who that team plays in those 2 rounds. Now this has a cascading effect that you must modify the schedules of the 2 opponents and their 2 opponents and their 2 opponents, and so on until you get into a cycle and you get back to the original team. Here's an example of partial swap teams. What you do in partial swap teams is you take a round and you swap 2 teams. Now this also has a cascading effect in that you must swap the opponents of these 2 teams, and then they must swap the opponents of them, and so on until you get back to a cycle and the schedule is back repaired again. For this problem, it is necessary to search both feasible and infeasible solutions. In order to do this, I instituted a weight, and as the weight increased, the solver would search for feasible solutions. As it got more and more feasible solutions, the weight would gradually decrease to the point where it could grab some infeasible solutions. As it grabbed those infeasible solutions, it increased the weight again and pushed it back towards feasible solutions. This was important because you didn't want to get too far away from your feasible solutions. And here's an example of some of the violations that could be created. In this example, you have some teams playing each other in consecutive weeks, and you also have 2 teams here that have 4 consecutive road games. Here you have the results for the solver for 16 teams. As you can see, it didn't quite get to the best known solution. However, it did get relatively close. I took the log of the time in this particular chart because I let it run for about 9 hours. This problem is extremely difficult due to the size of the search space. It increases much faster than a standard TSP type problem. The additional constraints on when teams can play each other in consecutive home games and consecutive road games makes simply producing a random schedule quite difficult. Even though I attempted to do a sort of reheating, you can see from the charts that it did get stuck relatively easily and a very difficult time escaping. One thing I could try to do is develop some sort of type of heuristic to try to get it to search areas of the neighborhood that are more likely to result in a better schedule. Well, this does in itself present some difficulty because you might have to go through infeasible solutions to escape the minimum. It is important to note, even though I didn't reach what are the best known solutions at the time, I did find that my average best solution was actually better than a published work that I read that was published about 8 or 9 years ago, but the particular authors do have some of the best known solutions of this problem. Thank everyone for their time today. Please let me know if you have any additional questions.